Not long removed from a dynasty, the New England Patriots seems like they have a long way to go. It seems like after this offseason, that long way got a little bit shorter. I'll tell you why I feel that way in just a second here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is a fact. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. Of course, it being Thursday, it means that I am joined by Chris Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and Locked On Steelers. And we're going to run down all of this post-draft information for you here on Locked On NFL. Where's your team every day? Thank you for making us your first listen. And we thank you for finding us wherever you get podcasts. Whether that is watching or listening, you better make sure you check it out so you don't miss an episode like the one you're here witnessing today. And it is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On, all one word, to learn more. You're going to learn a lot about the NFL today because me and Chris Carter are going to break that thing down for you like you can't get anywhere else. We're going to end the draft. We're going to end the draft. Look at that, Chris. I'm already screwing up. We're going to end the show talking about the draft and the Shedeur fallout, of course, and the Ravens outlook. We got to give Chris a chance to go off on the two teams that were at the top of the AFC North. That's the Ravens and the team that he covers, the Steelers. We'll talk about them doing what those two teams always seem to do, and that's fine. Players that fit what they need. Right in the middle, Falcons improve despite Prankgate. It'd be like a team like Atlanta to take a really good weekend when they finally did some things right and have it in wrongly because of a coach's son. We'll talk about that. I'm going to let loose on that little joker too. All right. And at the top of the show, great offseason for the Patriots. That's where we're going to park it. Chris Carter, when you win a lot, and you know this from the team that you cover in Pittsburgh, when you win a lot, man, sometimes maintaining that thing is really, really hard. The Patriots managed to do that for 20 years. Fell off, and it looked like last year they were the worst team I'd ever seen, and all of a sudden they get Drake May, and they start to look a little bit more respectable, even in losing. Then they get Mike Vrabel. Then they have a good free agency, and then they have a good draft. And now things are looking up for New England. It don't look like they're going to try to take too long to get back to the top.
No, yeah, I like what they're doing. They went and got their quarterback. I think getting Will Campbell, that was my best offensive lineman in the draft class. I thought that was pretty good. Travion Henderson was one of my favorite running backs in the draft class. I loved Kyle Williams as a separator. Jared Wilson was one of my top centers in the draft class. Like, their first four picks were all really solid. And then Joshua Farmer I had as a really good later round run-stuffing defensive tackle. They're putting the pieces in place to get back there. A lot of those were potential foundational picks that could really work with what they've already put together. You got to love Christian Gonzalez and guys that they've kept around too. The question will be, how well can the offensive line solidify to protect Drake May? How quickly can this offense find a rhythm with Mike Vrabel? But I certainly think they put some pieces together that can give you confidence that, hey, maybe they can build back to it. But it takes time to do so, man. Like people misunderstand, when you're, like you said, when you're at the top for so long and you're picking at the bottom of the draft for so long, there's very few organizations that can keep afloat while doing that. When after your franchise quarterback is gone, and that's what happened with Tom Brady. They swung at Mac Jones. That was a complete miss there, and so they swung again with Drake May, and now they're hoping that they hit there. I think that he had a decent rookie season. Now got to see if he's able to build upon that and grow, and getting a better offensive lineman, getting a talented playmaker in the backfield, all part of those the task there. So I'm intrigued to see where this team goes next year.
You mentioned Kyle Williams, the wide receiver, the route running dynamo from Washington State. Mm-hmm. They're adding him to Mac Hollins, who you saw catch a lot of big. Mac Hollins need to put some clothes on. He was in Buffalo walking into the game like he was crazy with no shoes. But we'll talk about that later. But they added Mac Hollins. They added Stephon Diggs. Also to the offensive line, and we talked about the high draft pick, of course, with Will Campbell. They got Morgan Moses, a veteran, to add some stability. The reason why I'm talking a lot about the offensive line is because one of their dynasty coaches, Dante Scarnecchia, He's like the Jeff Stoutland. He was Jeff Stoutland for Philadelphia before Jeff Stoutland was Jeff Stoutland. And before Dante Scarnecchia was Dante Scarnecchia, it was Hudson Houck. And before it was Hudson Houck, it was Howard Mudd. These were the offensive line coaches, and Richie Pettibone before that. These guys were always known to get the absolute best out of their offensive line. Well, who do we need to talk to? My man up with Locked On Eagles. He heard an interview from the great Dante Scarnecchia talking about Will Campbell. Check this out.
Dante Scarnecchia, his reputation is spotless. He is known as one of the best offensive line coaches at any level over the past number of decades. And lucky for us, he was here in New England, and we saw the genius at work. Well, that genius sat down with Karen Guregian of Mass Live. Let's begin with Dante Scarnecchia talking about Will Campbell's tape. Quote, you see the qualities. Look, no one has questioned his athleticism and his skill set. No one has, because there's nothing to question. He can really move. He's athletic for the size he has. He can run fast. He can bend really well. He's got great change of direction skills. Everybody just has a hard time with his arm length, unquote. Karen Guregian then writes, Scarnecchia explained that winning against powerful and uber-athletic pass rushers depends on who gets to the quote-unquote junction point first. Here's Scar, quote, between when you get there and when that guy gets there. If you beat him to that junction point, you have a real good chance to succeed. The junction point is the engagement. So therein lies the athletic part of it, the explosion out of your stance, getting to the junction point first, where you engage. To me, the most important thing, once you get there, you have to be in the best possible position to win, unquote.
There's arm length again being talked about, and nobody has a problem if it's 32 inches. They just got a problem if it's 31 7/8. Chris Carter, that's about this much. And people going to tell me that that's about this much, and that's supposed to matter whether or not a guy can play in the NFL or not.
No, yeah. Sometimes we get a little too far hung up on the, on measurables and things like that. But to me, I look at what did you do in college? What did your tape say? What does everything say that you're putting together? And for me, I think that when you're putting things together and you're an organization that sees those things, how do you stack the information that you learn? How do you stack the players that you're bringing? What kind of culture do you want to build? And those to me are so much bigger than sometimes some people get really bogged down and, oh, well, this guy's 10-yard split was just a little bit faster here, so I'm going to go with that. But again, hey, picking in the NFL, building, with players, it's an art. It's not a science. There's not, if there was a surefire way to determine who would be great and who would be the best picks every year, no one would ever miss on their draft picks. But it's not. It's an art. There's a lot of things that can go into it. Certainly, I think that there's aspects to it that I think some people overvalue. But hey, it's all about to each their own as far as how they want to evaluate each class and determine who they think their pick should be.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you an example of why I always said that everything matters, but everything that matters isn't everything. You feel what I'm saying, Chris? Jalen McLeod, a 6th-round pick from the Jaguars, 6'1", 234 pounds, right? He was a really good player in the SEC at edge rusher. He stacked that linebacker a little bit, but mainly his superpower, and I use that word for a reason. James Gladstone, the new GM, said something after he was assessing the picks. He said, Jalen McLeod, his superpower is that of a stand-up edge rusher, but because of his size, and I'm paraphrasing now, he says he goes to the Senior Bowl, he doesn't have a particularly great week, and they're asking him to do things he never did. But what impressed the Jaguars was that he didn't complain. So two things. The fact that he didn't complain when he was put in a situation, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we start talking about Shedeur, when he was put into a situation where he was uncomfortable in the process of evaluation because it was a job interview. But the other thing is the Jaguars didn't hold it against him. And the other thing is that they recognized his superpower and knew what it was before he even went to the Senior Bowl and probably wondered to themselves, why aren't they doing it? Oh, I know why they're doing it. They're trying to see if he can do something else. How's he responding to it? The kid didn't complain one bit, and he got drafted by the Jaguars, and they're going to try to put him in a position to do the things that he does well. I think that's what this is supposed to be about, and not everybody tripping on the fact that a dude's fingernail isn't long enough for him to have 32-inch arms. At some point when we start doing that, I think we're losing what this is all about. All right, I'm going to tell you what it's all about with the Atlanta Falcons improving. And then in true Falcon form, even when something good happens, something bad happens to make us forget about it. We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. There is absolutely nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Did you see the Lakers in Minnesota last night when the Lakers made that run and came back and hit that shot that put them ahead? Didn't last long, but it was very, very exciting. And the best place to be is at the game, and the best place to make sure you can get to that game is at Game Time, because Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I choose Game Time, because we can save the 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and whatever else you want to attend. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you get and what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Chris Carter, along with me, Tony Wiggins, here talking about the National Football League. It is the week right after the draft. The draft is always one of my favorite times of the year, but I cannot lie to you and tell you that most of us that do this for a living can't wait until it's gone that last week. That last week, it feels like we just swam across the Panama Canal and made it to the other side, man. I'm telling you, it beats you up, but you get all of the answers on draft day, and one of the answers everybody wanted, Chris, was where would Shedeur Sanders go? Would it be the Saints? Would it be the Browns? Would it be Pittsburgh? And all of those picks were thought to be in the first round. Turns out he went in the fifth round to the Cleveland Browns, who earlier took a quarterback in the third round, creating all kinds of controversy. Give us your assessment of this whole thing. When it comes to, we'll talk about him and his process at segment 3. The prank calls, man. The pranks. I just got to get to that first, Chris. I'm sorry. The pranks.
So we're talking about the pranks, not specifically Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, the pranks.
I mean, that's just classless. Like, I don't care. He's just a kid. No, I don't care, man. Like, you're 21. You ain't a kid no more. You're an adult going to college. This was irresponsible. This was embarrassing. This was classless. I think this is something that, like, if I'm a hirer, if I'm a person, that's looking to, if this is a kid who's coming out, I see, they got me calling him a kid, but if this is a person who comes out and is applying for jobs next year, and I see that name and I'm an employer and I catch wind that's part of something he did, I'm not hiring him. I'm not like that. I think that he's going to have to live with some of the consequences of his actions for quite a bit. Now, granted, will it actually happen? I don't know, but it seems like at least the NFL has said, hey, Falcons, you owe money, and the defensive coordinator, you owe money. So, maybe at least that kid can be like, look, you cost this family 6 figures of money. So, that's a big issue right there. But, ultimately, I'm not sure what you do to rectify this other than, making people pay money. Cause, it's a disgraceful thing. And look, I was one of the people that said, I don't think that Shedeur Sanders is a first round pick. I think that he should be picked later, but like, even with that, like, that's not because I dislike Shedeur. I'm an HBCU grad, so like I wanted to see Shedeur in prime succeed. I just, as an honest evaluator, I didn't see them as that, and so I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, so this is that. But when I saw that, I was just like, that's when I was just like, this is totally tasteless. And I hope that there's more repercussions for that person that did this, because that was just shameful and just like the tone when you the arrogance to post it online and not even blur out your faces. Like one, you post it online, people gonna find you. Like, no matter if you blur out your face, they're gonna find your IP address. Like I have one that like when you do anything online, know that people gonna find you, right? Mm-hmm. So be very careful with that. But then when you allowed your faces to be out there, and just like you feared no repercussions, and so for all the arrogance about Shedeur Sanders, he's too cocky with his wristwatch and all this other stuff, that's more cocky than anything I've ever seen. So get the heck out of here. So yeah, I hope that those involved have to reap some serious repercussions for that.
I do too, man, because I don't think people realize the juice that's involved here. And I'll tell you what I mean by juice. Dog, there was a kid, Baron Sorrell, who came to the first round knowing he wasn't a first round pick. But he sat there until the fourth round. And the commissioner came back out and called his name. You know why that drew the heartstrings of so many people? One, they were in Green Bay and Green Bay chose him. But two, because every one of us, and I'm speaking for a lot of people here, including myself, dreamed of that. I realized when I was 15 years old, it wasn't going to happen for me. I was too slow and wasn't athletic enough. But to have that moment, whether it's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, ninth round, you were robbed of the moment by one of your peers. Not only that, a coach's son, somebody who should know better. One, you ain't got to worry about nepotism. He ain't going to coach. He'll never coach in the National Football League. But two, and this is the most important thing my grandma said, you can curse around here if you want to. When I was 16, I probably had my first drink when I was 17 at home. She said, but if you ever do anything in public to embarrass me, that is where I draw the line. And I think the first thing I thought about is if my sons ever did anything like that to ruin my reputation. I can't even imagine what the sunken feeling I would feel is like, you don't respect me enough to embarrass me in front of my peers and my coworkers. And ruin 30 years of hard work and cachet. And now this is what you do. That's the way I would have felt about it. So I wanted to get that out there, and I blame the kid. I don't necessarily blame the pops for it, but I do wonder why a defensive coordinator needs the phone number of a kid he ain't gonna even call. I think they need to send this stuff to just GMs though, and I think so. I'm not gonna blame them totally for it, but what I will say is, now you learned your lesson. Send the number to the general managers, and that's it.
Yeah, and I mean, part of this is also the questions people brought up, them not having a bona fide NFL agent who could normally handle those things. That might have played a role into it. But even beyond that, because I can see a defensive coordinator have a number, because you know what? When you there's people at Locked On's numbers who I have that I have no. I'm never going to talk to that person, but it's just part of being a part of a company. So I'm sure there's a database where they're logged into where they get that. So I'm not as tied up about that part of it. The biggest thing I'm tied up about though is just that, allowing something like this to happen. Like the NFL is such a big organization that and a powerful organization that you should be afraid of doing something like this when you're tied to it. I would get Abdul Carter got prank called, right? I don't know who did that. It seems like that might be more of an outside source person that might not have been someone as tied to the NFL as this young man was. When I look at the when I look at this situation, how could you not fear for your family's financial support.
Livelihood? Yeah,
exactly. How could you not fear for doing something like that it's going to get tied back to your dad, who is making hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars off of this career, and is probably paying for your college? That is just the ultimate privilege. Just how how does that not register for you? That goes to just some people. They don't appreciate how their families got to be in some situations. But when I was a kid, right, there was one time where my old man was he was a high school football coach, and again, a high school football coach, there was one time he brought me to a meeting, and it was just a meeting with the little league coaches of the area that he coached in. And some of them had some serious criticisms about my dad. They were like, you don't do enough for your players. You don't stay up late doing things for them. Now, mind you, I was maybe 9-10 years old. And one of my biggest complaints was my dad is up all night looking up film on these players. And that's how I got into watching film.
Right.
Was that I would stay up. No, that was how I spent time with my dad sometimes, because he would be cutting up his players, not just so they could be better in the game, but he'd be making their highlight tapes and sending them to the colleges and say, hey, this is my D tackle, this is my corner, this is my guard. He would do that all the time. And so I had the mind where I heard this fifth just idiot coach talking about you don't do enough for these kids, man. And I have a mind to be like, don't you ever talk about what my dad don't do, because I can't spend time with him because he's doing stuff for these kids. But you know what? I had the sense, because my dad raised me right, to be like, shut up when grown folk talking.
There you go.
And so like if 9 and 10-year-old Chris can realize that maybe you could shut the heck up, maybe the 21-year-old dude should realize I shouldn't try to make this national scene with this big profile player that could severely damage my father's reputation in this business that is making our family a lot of money and also potentially impact my future work prospects. But who knows? Maybe this kid isn't impacted. We know how things work for some people in this country.
Yeah, man, you probably hit it dead on the head. You know, Jeff Ulbrich been coaching a long time. You know, it's a lot of lamb chops and prime rib being eaten off of that NFL salary. And you grew up living probably in a pretty good neighborhood, traveling around, going to games and having access. And then this is how you reward your pop. Speaking of those Falcons real quick, I got to get to the football side of it. Something actually happened good for them. They finally addressed one of their needs. Here's Aaron Freeman. He has a guest, my man Damian Parsons from Locked On NFL Draft, talking about them adding 2 good pieces to their pass rush.
Did Terry Fontenot and the Atlanta Falcons knock it out of the park? The Falcons came away in round 1 with 2 edge rushers, much needed, long in the making with the Falcons finally addressing their pass rush. Well, let's start off with the sort of headliner of the Falcons draft class, Jalen Walker. What were your thoughts on the pick for him at 15, and sort of what do you envision the versatile, hybrid, all the words with Jalen Walker, his role within the Falcons defense?
My initial reaction when Jalen Walker came off the board, I felt like the Carolina Panthers, you know, it's like that softball pitch to Barry Bonds. That's what it felt like to me. Like, I was just like, because at 8, that's kind of the position I expected him to go. They went Ted McMillan, who I love as well. But I was like, man, the Falcons, he just fell right into their hands. And being able to get a guy, like you said, that brings that versatility. He can play the off-ball backer, line up off the edge. And for me, I mean, I kind of want him playing a lot more edge than off-ball backer. And if I'm the Falcons, that's what I want too. Like, I want to get him. Don't get me wrong. You can get some mugged up looks with him and Caden Ellis and mug the A gaps, get some simulated pressures. We know Raheem knows how to devise a really good defensive scheme in that regard. But
so you see, you got the Falcons here, and to pour into what we're going to get into with Shedeur, you got the Falcons drafting a humble leader who plays like his feet are on fire in Jalen Walker. And then they double back and then draft a dude that everybody thought was going to fall because of so-called character issues, but his talent is so high that they're willing to take a chance on him. I think the Falcons did a pretty good job to double up and go all in on trying to get some pass rush.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting move to say, hey, we're going to go get those guys there. But, man, they traded away a future first to trade up and get a second edge rusher this year. That I'm very curious about. Now, maybe it's because they feel like, hey, you know, we got our quarterback of the future, Michael Penix. We got, you know, Bijan Robinson. We got players. We got Drake London. We got pieces in place. We need to get these edge rushers solidified. And I like their 3rd-round pick, Xavier Watts. I thought he was one of the better safeties of this class, of this draft class. And then they doubled up at safety. It's funny, they doubled up at edge rusher and safety with Walker and Pierce, and then Watts, and then Billy Bowman. But yeah, I just I'm not sure about the trade up that they did to get that. Was it worth it? We'll see. But they need both of these guys to hit. They, you know, because I do think the Falcons they're trying to position themselves as more of a win now situation with some of these the trades that they're making here. So I'd be eager to see if the Steelers, or excuse me, the Falcons are able to capitalize on this sooner rather than later. But certainly, you know, I had high grades on Jalon Walker. I liked James Pierce. So we'll just see how that plays out.
We'll see how it plays out, especially since the fact that they didn't have to trade up for Mike Green, who went to the Ravens, and I had Mike Green ranked a little bit ahead of Pierce. So we'll see how that works out as we get to the point where we'll talk about the Ravens and the Steelers, the 2 teams challenging for the AFC North, seems like every single season. We'll discuss them in segment 3, but we'll start it out, continue with this talk about Shedeur, and I'll give you an interesting way to look at it in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Oh my God, man. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn on any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play, including or it's included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25, to Call of Duty, and easily as you can stream your favorite shows. What if you could jump into your favorite Xbox titles without needing your console in every room? Woo! That would make a lot of people's day super, super happy. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass, Ultimate subscription, and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, second generation, Fire TV 4K Max, first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube, third generation. All right, third final segment here on Locked On NFL. We were talking about Shedeur earlier, man, and I'm gonna give you my quick spill on what I believe all of that stuff ended up mattering and making a difference. I just think it didn't come down to them not being used to cocky. They drafted Cam Newton number 1 overall. It didn't come down to them not wanting to draft cocky, because if you ever heard Cam Ward talk, Cam Ward is a little bit cocky.
Yeah.
And they're both black. This came down to the fact that the dude blew up. He had subpar traits, and he absolutely blew up on a lot of these meetings. As a lot of these things are now coming out, and people think it's saving face. It's not saving face. What it is they just didn't want to bury the guy because their dad is part of their fraternity. But the dude really, really walked into the meetings acting like he was his dad, and it just didn't match up with what people saw, in my opinion. Listen to the Locked On Squad shows, Locked On NFL Squad, and Nick Cattles talks about it a little bit, and we'll go back over it once we hear this.
The NFL draft, a little bit less boring. I mean, the first trade coming up pretty quick. I think the board really didn't shake up too much from that trade, but, first trade coming in pick number 2. So some exciting things. But, of course, the most exciting thing all weekend long is the amount of times you heard the name Shedeur Sanders, and it was not for good reasons. What were your thoughts as Shedeur Sanders continued to slide? And when did you think the Pats might draft him to replace Drake May?
Oh, yeah. Well, first, can I just say T's and P's for Mel Kiper, T's and P's, because I just want to make
sure
my gosh, he was able to get through that very challenging time of his life. I don't know what was going on with Mel. My freaking goodness. Like the Shedeur Sanders stuff, what bothered me the most, David, was the fact that I just felt like they were telling one side of the story, which was like, oh, this poor young man, he keeps falling. And I understand the adversity. All right. Falling in the NFL draft is never fun. And I'm sure he was embarrassed, but he wasn't diagnosed with cancer. He wasn't fighting some real life tragedy. He's going to be drafted in the NFL. His dad is Neon Dion. He had his jersey retired at Colorado for no reason whatsoever, other than his dad's Neon. So I didn't feel bad for him that as much as apparently some of the people that were doing the TV felt bad for him. But when you read about it, and I'm sure you guys read a bunch of the stuff, he didn't necessarily win a bunch of people over during the process. I don't think the things that were said before the draft helped him at all, either by him or his dad. And I just thought it was a lack of accountability almost from like the family and him, because they're like, oh my God, we can't believe he's falling. It's like, I think they played a role in it. So the 5th round, I was surprised he fell to the 5th freaking round, but I wasn't surprised that he fell out of the 1st after what had been said about him.
Chris, this just comes down to this. The networks ought to be ashamed of themselves, and Mel Kiper sitting up there acting like a petulant child needs to quit. He wasn't upset for Shedeur. He was upset that NFL scouts once again disagreed with what he was saying all of this time. They've done this before. They did it with the Walsh kid from BYU about 30 years ago, where he went in the 7th round and Mel thought he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Guys are mad because their egos are hurt, because the people that do this for real don't agree with them. And if you ask me, we didn't teach Shedeur and the rest of these kids and everybody doesn't handle everything the same, but we didn't teach them well, because they won 4 games at Colorado and they had every celebrity and their brother over there on the sideline celebrating it. And every network had 100,000 cameras following them everywhere. And they won 4 games. You're rewarding not even mediocrity. You're rewarding people who won 4 freaking games, and you're making them feel like they're the biggest thing in the world. That's why the kid felt entitled, in my opinion. That's at least a part of it.
And again, they did win 9 games this past season, but yeah, I feel you. Like I think that there's too much made about the cockiness of Shedeur Sanders, and again, I think it's the profile. I think what happened here was him and his dad got bad information. They thought they were going to be top 5, top 10 pick bona fide. And listen, I thought they could have gone there because I don't have faith in NFL teams scouting quarterbacks correctly. Like Mel Kiper and all his ranting and raving, he was right about that. The NFL does not know how to evaluate quarterbacks. Again, you go back to 2010, and like the only quarterback who's won a Super Bowl that was a first round pick for the team that drafted him was Patrick Mahomes. Teams, you get it wrong more often than they get it right. Also, Mel Kiper gets it wrong more often than he gets it right. He thought Jamarcus Russell was a superstar. He thought Jimmy Clausen was the first best pick in the draft. Look, I whiff. I'm not saying like we all make mistakes here. Right. We all make mistakes here. And I think that's part of acknowledging the draft process as a whole. But let's not get it twisted, man. I think that Shedeur Sanders, if Shedeur Sanders was 3 inches taller and had a cannon arm, no one would care about his wristwatch because the problem is he doesn't have the cannon arm he can get the ball deep, but he can't. I haven't seen enough of him zipping the pass 30 yards on a rope in between the cover 3 seams or down, just over the linebacker, just under the safety in the cover 2, right as the progression is working there. A lot of his best plays were sandbox plays where he would roll out to his right, wait for a guy, and he would just be like, Travis Hunter's down there somewhere, and he would put it right on the money. And like that's fun in college. That is not structured NFL play. I talked to front office people and former front office people about this in the NFL, and I was asking like, hey, this is what I see. Am I off? And they're like, no, Chris, that's why we think he's not going to go this high, because teams are going to see this. And unless he interviews great, he's probably a mid round to late round pick in our opinions. And that's what I kept saying on Locked On Steelers. I'm like, guys, I don't think the Steelers should take him. Someone else might, because I thought the same thing about Jackson Dart. I had Jackson Dart rated below Shedeur Sanders.
You sure did.
And he went ahead of him. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Giants are right. Who knows? But my point here is I think Shedeur Sanders got bad information. I don't care about his cockiness. You know what? Baker Mayfield's cocky. I mean, planted flags in the middle of stadiums, was grabbing his private parts. All the Baker Mayfield was so cocky. But you know what? Baker Mayfield also was a Heisman Trophy winner. And I think that's where you look at his college play and you're like, man, that dude did it at the highest level. It was in the playoffs. Like, I get when those guys are taken. If Shedeur Sanders, like Cam Newton dragged Auburn to a national championship.
Dragged him.
He was unstoppable. If Shedeur Sanders did that, no one would care about his wristwatch. They'd be like, you know what? Bring that guy in here because he's going to win me some money. He's going to win me a Super Bowl. Now, do I think that there are people in the NFL who are like, I don't like this guy and I don't like Dion?
Of course.
Absolutely. Those people exist. But like when people said the entire NFL was colluding against Shedeur Sanders, you mean to tell me that Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, that were the first organization to hire a black assistant coach, the first organization to name a black quarterback, the starting quarterback to start a season, and Joe Gilliam, the team that invented the Rooney Rule, which created the rule to make sure that minority candidates get hired, the team that hired the first ever black head coach to win a Super Bowl, and Tony Dungy, he started with Chuck Noll's team, the team that had the second black coach to ever win a Super Bowl, and Mike Tomlin, who's still their head coach after 18 years. You mean to tell me that team? Oh, and by the way, if you need something very recently, you mean the Mike Tomlin, the guy who hired Brian Flores while he was suing the NFL for racial discrimination. You mean that Mike Tomlin said, I'm going to stick it to Shedeur Sanders? Because no, they looked at his talent and they said, we don't think that guy's it. That's what. And again, there's some people that are like the racist version of that. But to me, I think that the biggest thing was Shedeur wasn't as advertised by his dad and himself, and the tape didn't translate, and they didn't interview with some people, and they didn't take enough interviews seriously, and this is the repercussions of that. How he bounces back from that is in his hands. In the NFL, he hasn't been blackballed out the league. He's going to get his chance, and I'm looking forward to seeing it because, again, I'm an HBCU grad. I want to see the young man do well. Even though I cover the Steelers, and he's going to be playing for the Browns. I'll be intrigued to see what he does, but I look at Shedeur Sanders. I don't think this was some collusion effort. I think this was something that was just based off of a misread. Again, misreads happen all the time. Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh thought that he could just take off a whole year and get paid bigger money than what the Steelers were offering him. He took a contract with a little bit more guaranteed money, but ultimately lost out on tens of millions of dollars because of what he decided to do in Pittsburgh and go into the Jets. So I think this is a misjudgment, and that's the primary thing here. This isn't as big of a conspiracy theory.
30 seconds. Who had the best offseason, the Ravens or the Pittsburgh Steelers? And we're going to assume Pittsburgh eventually gets Aaron Rodgers.
It's a good question. I think the Steelers, because they've added DK Metcalf as a serious receiver threat. I think that they've added to the D line. I don't think quarterback's as big of a problem as people have made it out to be. I think either Aaron Rodgers is going to sign, Mason Rudolph's going to start. They're going to be the same thing as last year. They're building together the foundation. Now, I will say this. I think that the Ravens have the potential to have a much better one. I just need to see it from I need to make sure that Mike Green stays out of trouble. But Malachi Starks, heck of an addition to one of the weaknesses of the team, which was deep coverage issues that they had last year. And Mike Green, to me, I had him as the 15th best player on my board. Them getting him in the second round was such a steal. Granted, obvious reasons why, but we will see how that plays out. If those two guys are available and playing this year. I also loved Aeneas Peebles in the 6th round. So maybe I'm going back on myself. Maybe I'm saying the Ravens had the better one. It's always tough to tell. I hate grading draft classes right away because you don't ever know. But to me, I would say the Steelers had a slightly better offseason simply because they added DK Metcalf. Derek Harmon, I think, was the best player available of all the players that either of these teams picked. And I do think the Steelers short up of things. I also think Caleb Johnson is going to be a monster for the Steelers run game.
I do too. And I'm going to give you props too. You broke the pick, Derek Harmon. And
yes, sir.
And we had talked about that for months, and you actually
so we do here
before anybody else. That's right.
So you got Schefter, B. Rappaport, B. Autumn.
You beat him. You beat him. You got it, man.
Look, local reporting, it's valuable. Trust you.
That's right.
Get into your local reporters.
That's right. All right, man. Make sure y'all check out Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino. They are like one of the same people when you listen to them. Make sure you check that out to help you with all of you're sitting there trying to figure out who's going to play. They're going to go through each one of these rosters and help you understand what these teams have and what they don't. Make sure you check it out. Chris Carter and I, we overshot the runway, but I know y'all ain't mad at it. 36 minutes here with us today, and we appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow with Matt Williamson here on Locked On NFL.